Before the new year, the new transfer student kept finding excuses to get close to my childhood friend and fiancé. She'd either fake a sprained ankle or pretend to need help with homework. But what she didn't know was that my childhood friend has severe germophobia and an obsessively possessive personality. When she deliberately hitched up her skirt in front of me, trying to fall into his arms, he simply stepped back, watching with cold indifference as she tumbled into the swimming pool, leaving her to splash around helplessly. If you're that eager to end it all, be my guest. 1. My childhood friend, Lucas Reed, has both germophobia and an obsessive personality disorder. I'm the only person he allows to touch him. At the worst point of his condition, even his parents couldn't make physical contact. As the only one who could keep this wild dog in check. In 8th grade, I, the housekeeper's daughter, started attending the same prestigious private school as the young master. On my first day, as I walked past the classroom in my uniform skirt, some idiot whistled at me. Lucas immediately hurled a chair at them. Even in this elite school full of privileged heirs, Lucas was the most feared of them all. When he charged out with those wild, bloodshot eyes, I simply stood there and softly called his name. He froze instantly. He turned around, giving me those puppy dog eyes. The fierce beast transformed into an obedient pup in a heartbeat. That day, news of the school's obsessive heartthrob's transformation spread like wildfire. Soon after, a saying made its rounds through the school. If you cross Lucas, Sarah might still save your skin. But if you cross Sarah, you're basically dead. Though it sounds like teenage drama, it perfectly captured the dynamic. This reputation followed us from middle school through high school, until sophomore year, when some clueless girl decided to challenge it. 2. In our sophomore year, a transfer student joined our class. Her waist-length hair and innocent face caught everyone's attention immediately. Not because of her beauty, but because she looked eerily similar to me. Even her distant demeanor mirrored mine. Lucas studied her face intently. As she glided past us, she tossed her hair gracefully, shooting me a challenging look. What she failed to notice was Lucas's subtle frown as he watched her. After first period, I was called to the teacher's office in my role as class president. The gist was to help the new student settle in. I agreed, but when I returned, I found Lucas waiting at the door, arms crossed. His eyes lit up when he saw me, and he started walking over. Right then, Sue accidentally twisted her ankle on the perfectly smooth floor, falling precisely toward his arms. Lucas's frown deepened as he stepped aside. A loud thud echoed through the hallway. Sue hit the ground hard. Without sparing her a glance, Lucas strode to my side, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. 3. What did the teacher want? The girl on the floor shot me a venomous glare. Remembering my promise to help her, I sighed and offered my hand. But the moment our fingers touched, she dramatically collapsed again. Her eyes welled up with tears as she looked at me. Sarah, I just got here. What did I do to make you treat me this way? She lowered her gaze demurely. Her delicate features and graceful neck were undeniably beautiful. Those tear-filled eyes could melt most hearts. Students in the hallway turned to watch the scene unfold. She thought she'd cleverly claimed the moral high ground. Little did she know they were just enjoying the show. I'd always been known for my kindness at school. Not only did I never sick my wild dog on people, but I actually helped others regularly. That's why they chose me as class president. Lucas took his protective stance beside me. His disgust was practically radiating off him. The bustling corridor fell silent as everyone backed away, not wanting to risk getting caught in the crossfire. But Sue couldn't read the room and pointed at me accusingly. Lucas, look what she's doing to me. Before my wild dog could bare his teeth, I grabbed his hand. Let's go. Clearly, someone doesn't want our help. Lucas's attention immediately zeroed in on our intertwined hands. 4. Our school's lunch break lasted 2 hours. Most students used this time to nap in their dorms. I'd stepped out briefly to grab a book. Passing the flower beds behind the cafeteria, I heard movement. At our prestigious school, the rich kids often got up to all sorts of mischief in hidden corners. I wasn't interested and actually picked up my pace. Then I heard my name. That witch Sarah is such a pain. Can't you figure out how to get rid of her? I glanced over and spotted Sue perched on a stone table. Surprisingly, she was quietly eating her lunch, not speaking. Another voice materialized from nowhere. Then you need to rack up more romance points. Everything becomes possible once your score is high enough. It was a mature male voice, uncomfortably close. But when I looked around, no one else was there. The term romance points gave me a pretty good idea of what was happening. Didn't you say this face was Lucas's type? Why isn't he interested at all? Who says he's not? Your points went up by 1. That surprised me. I hadn't expected my wild dog to waver even slightly. What's my next move? He clearly doesn't fall for the sweet and innocent act. Then switch tactics. Men love novelty. Sarah's always so cold and distant, she probably never shows him any warmth. Try being more enthusiastic. Fine, I'll do it your way. I slipped away quietly. 5. Sure enough, that afternoon, Sue changed her strategy. The moment class ended, she bounced over to our seats, workbook in hand, chattering away like an overexcited bird. The student in front finally snapped. Do you ever shut up? The teacher just explained all this. Were you even listening? Sue flipped her hair dramatically. Since when does paying attention mean I can't ask questions? If these basic problems confuse you after the explanation, maybe you should get your head checked. Oh please, like I'm actually here for the homework. I just want to spend time with Lucas. She turned around, propping her chin on her hand, flashing him a brilliant smile. Her face lit up like a sunflower tracking the sun. Lucas, I like you. The already quiet classroom fell dead silent. All eyes snapped to us. Someone even woke up their sleeping classmate to watch the drama unfold. Lucas looked to me for guidance. I turned away, pretending not to notice. Though I could hear his teeth grinding from here, his voice could have frozen hell over. I don't want your affection. Get lost. I glanced back. Sue's painted lips parted to speak again, but Lucas hurled his book at her. Are you deaf? Snickers rippled through the classroom. Whatever dignity Sue had left crumbled to dust. She shot me a hateful glare before storming off. 6. PE was our last class that day. Everyone raced out when the bell rang. Sue cast one last longing look our way but fled when she met Lucas's icy stare. I took my time packing up, waiting for everyone to leave. As I took my first step, Lucas caught my wrist and pulled me into his arms. His voice had that puppy-like whimper. Why wouldn't you look at me earlier? I'm looking now. I cupped his chin. See, that's not what I meant. When she confessed, why didn't you look at me? I pretended to think about it. Well, you handled it perfectly on your own, didn't you? Though we both knew that wasn't the real answer, he calmed down. Or rather, he never truly got angry with me, he just needed reassurance. Despite his fierce reputation, he was really just an insecure puppy. That's why he became so possessive. He was terrified someone would come between us again. Can you let go now? I patted his hand on my waist. You won't leave me, right? He stared at me, breathing quick and shallow, desperately seeking reassurance. I stroked his head gently. Of course not. 7. During PE, Sue kept acting suspicious. She wanted to get close to Lucas but feared his reaction. A group of girls gathered around me. Class president, shouldn't you do something about her? This can't go on forever. She's only been here a day, and she's already this bad. If you don't stop her now, she'll get worse. As they spoke, I overheard Sue's conversation with the mysterious voice. What are you afraid of? Go for it, this is your mission. Easy for you to say. That book nearly hit my head, and he looked ready to kill me. Come on, he's just possessive, not a murderer. At least give me time to recover. My heart's still racing. You'll never succeed being this timid. If you can't handle a medium difficulty world, how can I trust you with the hard ones? From their exchange, I pieced it together. Sue was a romance game player. A classic novel trope. She'd entered this world to romance Lucas. The mature voice was her game system, guiding her along. The only mystery was why I could hear their conversation. Did anyone else hear a man's voice? The others shook their heads. Apparently, I was the only one who could. Sophie and her system continued their pointless argument while I turned my attention back to the girls around me. They were still discussing the earlier topic. Even though Lucas only has eyes for you, Sarah, she looks so much like you. Aren't you worried? What nonsense. Sarah and Lucas are perfect together. Oh, my big mouth. Don't worry, class president, young Master Lucas would never betray you. Look how desperate Sophie is acting. I'm worried she might throw herself at him. I turned to them with my characteristic calm smile. As fellow girls, we shouldn't spread such dubious rumors. They gave awkward smiles. But thanks for your concern. I'll keep an eye on things. As I walked away, I beckoned Lucas with a finger. He came running like an eager puppy. Where else could you find such an obedient dog? 8. The next day, Sophie tried a new approach. When we arrived at class in the morning, we found breakfast on both Lucas's desk and mine. Surprisingly, she'd prepared portions for both of us. However, both identical servings contained only Lucas's favorite foods. I had to admit, the system was quite capable to know Lucas's food preferences, but its abilities seemed quite limited. Because Lucas wasn't just obsessive, he was also severely germophobic. His daily food had to be fresh, and his utensils went through multiple sterilizations. Even his dorm room at school was cleaned daily by dedicated staff, not allowing even a single hair to remain. Seeing an oily breakfast on his study desk, of course he'd be furious. I saw it just a moment before Lucas did. His face instantly darkened like a storm cloud. The oppressive atmosphere brought a chill to the air. Surrounding classmates shivered, feeling the temperature drop. Lucas raised his foot to kick the desk. One glance from me, and he quietly lowered it. "Who put this here?" he asked coldly. Of course, everyone knew who it was. I was about to say something in her defense. Then the clueless girl came running over, hand raised high, wearing a proud smile. "Me, I did." Lucas shot her an icy glare, and she spun around 180 degrees in an instant. "I'll go ask around." 9. Lucas was incredibly difficult to please. Even he admitted this. I'd told him before that if he hadn't been born into an extremely wealthy family, with his personality, he wouldn't have survived past elementary school. Now, this fact was about to become common knowledge throughout the school, because Lucas had his entire desk and chair set replaced, along with everything on it. Sophie huddled in the corner, not daring to breathe. In just 2 days, she'd managed to trigger every single one of Lucas's landmines. I was curious whether she would give up or become more determined. Surely she understood how difficult Lucas was by now. I just hoped her future attempts would be more sophisticated. That evening after school, she cornered me at the bathroom entrance. "Sarah, give Lucas to me." Her unexpected directness caught me off guard for a moment. Then she continued, "He might be obsessed with you now, but people change. You're just a housekeeper's daughter, you can't help him in the business world. In looks, figure, and family background, you're inferior to me in every way. Rather than waiting for him to get tired of you and kick you aside, why not leave now? I can give you 20 million and send you and your family abroad. You're studying hard just to make more money in the future anyway, why not take this offer now and live a good life?" 10. I maintained my usual faint smile, calmly asking in return, "If you're so perfect, why do you need me to give him to you?" She seemed struck a nerve, her expression changing dramatically. Stepping forward, she glared at me viciously. She was slightly taller, and up close she could look down at me. Seemingly trying to intimidate me, she lifted my chin with one finger. Speaking contemptuously, "I'm being nice by telling you this. Don't refuse the carrot and force me to use the stick." I gently brushed her hand away. Without looking at her, I carefully wiped my fingers. "I don't drink alcohol, but thank you for the offer." After speaking, I tossed the tissue into the trash can beside her and turned to leave. After a few steps, I remembered something and turned back to say, "Here's some advice, stay away from Lucas." She crossed her arms and rolled her eyes dismissively. "You've been warned." When I was far away, I heard the system say, "You're useless. Can't even handle one little girl, what good are you?" Then came a loud bang. The poor metal trash can had been viciously kicked, lying twisted on the ground. 11. Sophie didn't heed my warning. From the next day on, her attempts became increasingly shameless. The girls' school uniform consisted of a shirt and skirt, with black and red sportswear for PE. Sophie somehow managed to turn the skirt into a tight-fitting deep V-neck. Even her sportswear exposed her midriff. She usually wore a coat over it, which she'd unbutton whenever she saw Lucas. Her gaze was carefully calculated, scanning up from below, lingering for a moment before quickly lowering, never meeting his eyes directly. She was beautiful, undeniably so. Even I had to admire her looks. But her seductive manner made people uncomfortable to look at her for too long. After several days, she hadn't earned even a glance from Lucas. Instead, her desk was filled with love letters from others. This infuriated her, leading to daily arguments with her system. Fighting during class, fighting after class. Unable to turn it off. While trying to listen to teachers, I had to hear their endless bickering. It was driving me to the edge of a nervous breakdown. 12. What's wrong with you lately? You don't look well at all. I was napping on my desk and waved dismissively. Next class is swimming. If you're not feeling well, we can skip it. I sat bolt upright. No, we must go. It had taken months of persuasion from the entire family to convince Lucas to attend swimming class. Missing it for something so minor would be such a waste. Besides, Lucas had grown up now and wouldn't let anyone watch him change. The last time I'd seen his abs was 3 years ago. Even then, they were well defined and his physique was impressive. Now that he'd learned martial arts and went to the gym weekly, his body must be even more amazing. How could I miss such an opportunity? I stared at his abdomen, letting out a couple of gleeful chuckles. Following my gaze, he suddenly grabbed my hand, slowly pressed it against his stomach. The touch was warm, softer than I'd imagined, but with good elasticity. You've felt it now, so we don't need to go, right? I insisted. I still can't swim, I need to learn. Seeing my serious expression, he finally gave in. If you feel unwell, we'll leave immediately. 13. The swimming class was a sea of bare skin. Lucas was incredibly jealous, constantly blocking my view. If I hadn't firmly resisted, he would have covered my eyes. Though it didn't really matter, because everyone else there was skinny. Even those with muscles had only a thin layer, no comparison to Lucas. After I told him this, his entire demeanor became incredibly smug. Though others might not notice, his tail was practically wagging in the air. He quietly stepped back, brushing against me. After explaining the techniques, the teacher stood aside. The pool was packed like dumplings in soup. Lucas watched for a long time, refusing to take a single step. I found his hesitation amusing, and had to coax him to teach me. He stared at me silently, saying nothing but his eyes speaking volumes. I coldly stated, if you won't teach me, I'll find someone else. Just as I stepped forward, he grabbed my wrist. Fine. One word that seemed to cost him all his energy. For someone with severe germophobia, getting into this dumpling soup was impossible. He could only guide me from the poolside. After I learned a bit, I swam out on my own. Turning back after a couple of strokes, I saw Sophie starting to slip, coincidentally, right in front of Lucas. Also coincidentally, her skirt floated up, exposing her pale thighs. Lucas's eyes were fixed on me, completely unaware of her. Just as Sophie was about to fall into his arms. Without even glancing at her, he stepped back. A dull splash followed, water spraying everywhere. Standing nearby, I got splashed in the face. As the water cleared, I looked up to meet his smiling face. That dog, he did it on purpose. That one step achieved 2 goals at once. Sophie struggled to climb out, wiping her face as she looked toward the edge. Lucas coldly stated, I've tolerated everything else, but who do you think you are to try touching me? If you're tired of living, I can help you die. 14. Sophie floated in the water, motionless for a long while. Perhaps she too had seen the sincerity in Lucas's eyes. Starting to doubt the system's words, he's just obsessive, not a psychotic killer. She realized that Lucas was completely insane. He truly wouldn't have minded if she drowned in the pool. In my opinion, both she and her system had expected too much from Lucas. What is an obsessive personality? A true obsessive disregards morality, law, and public opinion. What they want, they must have. Lucas was exactly that kind of madman. The only reason he followed morals and laws was because I did. A wild wolf might become a dog once it's fed. It was the same with him. Only after getting what he wanted would he transform from a mad dog to an obedient one. After PE class, he sat me down on a bench to dry my hair. He tested the temperature carefully before putting the dryer near my head. You didn't even look up earlier. How did you know she was coming? I have good ears. I smiled, more like a good nose. Fine, good nose then. A working nose makes a good dog. I pushed down his arm and turned to look at him. So you know you're a dog. I know they call me Mad Dog behind my back. 15. After drying my hair, it was time to leave school. As we walked past the garden behind the cafeteria, we heard familiar voices. If anyone can actually win him over, I'll call them master. Oh come on, why so impatient? I have one last trump card. Want to know what it is? If you had a good plan, why didn't you say so earlier? I wanted to try gentler methods first, but since they want to make it dramatic, let's give them drama. Since Lucas only pays attention to Sarah, why not just have Sarah die? Wouldn't that solve everything? I stopped in my tracks, turning toward the garden. The thick tree shadows blocked my view. What's wrong? Lucas looked where I was looking but saw nothing. Sophie, sitting on the bench behind, heard us and abruptly stopped talking to her system. Suddenly, everything went quiet. Nothing. I took Lucas's hand, looking up with a reassuring smile. I thought I heard a cat. Do you want to keep a cat? No, I'm just worried it might die suddenly and no one would notice. Tomorrow, I'll have someone search the school. If they find it, we'll take good care of it. 16. While I was still wondering how Sophie planned to harm me, she showed up the next morning with bruises all over her face. When classmates asked with concern, she just shook her head evasively. The next day, her arm was in a cast. By the 3rd day, her injuries were worse, with red marks around her neck. Though I suspected this was a plot against me, I had to applaud her courage. Anyone willing to hurt themselves this badly would succeed at anything. Then I heard her talking to the system. Your illusion technique works well, no one spotted any flaws. There are no flaws because these are real injuries. I just lowered the pain sensation. And here I thought you were finally being useful. Their relationship was interesting. They looked down on each other yet couldn't live without each other. Closer than colleagues but more hostile than family. At the classroom door, Sophie timidly grabbed Lucas's sleeve, head lowered. Lucas coldly shook her off but surprisingly didn't say anything harsh. His brows furrowed, emotions unclear. I had to admit, Sophie's move was clever. Because for Lucas, seeing someone with a face so similar to mine beaten this badly would inevitably stir up memories. 17. Before meeting Lucas, I was just an ordinary student at a regular elementary school. Being from a single-parent family with a housekeeper mother, I was disliked by classmates. Looking back, it was definitely bullying. The whole class agreed to ignore me. They wouldn't even pass on teachers' announcements. When I didn't react, it escalated to physical bullying. Beating, tearing up my test papers, spreading glue on my chair. My misery greatly pleased them. Of course, I tried fighting back. But whenever students complained to teachers, parents would be called. Mom was too busy to deal with me. Even when she did come, she'd just force me to apologize. In 5th grade, I was kidnapped. That's where I first met Lucas, in the kidnapper's hideout. He had a high fever from constant vomiting. The kidnappers didn't want to get a doctor, just forced some random medicine into him. It didn't help. I tricked the guard into eating food mixed with filth, and while he was stuck in the bathroom, I helped everyone escape. Lucas couldn't move, so I carried him on my back. We walked so far. That incident left deep trauma in him, making him extremely dependent on me. After learning about my past experiences, he constantly regretted, "If only we'd met earlier, you wouldn't have had to endure all that." Those things I'd almost forgotten, he held on to like an obsession. He truly wanted to make amends. For Lucas, this might be a good, perhaps the only chance for redemption. Unexpectedly, Sophie had stumbled onto his weak point. 18. Everyone's worried about me. Don't you want to know what happened? He stood with hands in pockets, staring ahead. Sophie didn't wait for a response and continued. I'm new here, I don't understand anything. They beat me, saying I shouldn't try to seduce you. I told them if liking you means getting beaten, then they might as well beat me to death. So every day after school, they corner me at the gate and beat me, saying they won't stop until I give up pursuing you. I just like you, what did I do wrong? I don't care who hates me enough to hurt me like this. I only care. If I really get beaten to death, would you miss me? Lucas didn't answer, just turned and left. Before he entered the classroom, Sophie called out tearfully. Lucas, you're so stupid. I know you don't believe me, but think about it, would I beat myself up like this? Love has blinded you, you can't tell friend from foe anymore. No one in this world loves you more than I do. Lucas slightly turned his head, giving her a glance. Then the familiar system voice rang out. Congratulations. Romance points, 11%. 19. The hallway fell silent again. But this time, everyone seemed moved. Indeed, who would believe someone would destroy their own face, getting beaten black and blue just to pursue a boy? The girls who had warned me during PE whispered among themselves. When they saw me looking, they scattered in panic. I'd become something frightening. During the next class, Lucas didn't speak at all. At dismissal, I waved for him to come home. Surprisingly, he said, "You go ahead, I have something to handle." From the window, I watched him turn left after leaving school, heading away from home. The empty classroom felt eerily quiet. I picked up Lucas's bag too and headed home. Since 8th grade, I'd never walked home alone like this. Turning right after leaving school, less than 500 meters away was a residential area. At the corner near the entrance, someone dragged me away. In a corner by the trash cans, a group of thugs surrounded me. They cursed. Why do we need so many people for one little girl? Who cares? Orders are orders, just do it. Tisk, she's pretty. Shame to kill her, maybe we could. Boss said grab her and act immediately, no extra business. My hands were tied, and I tilted my head to look at them helplessly. Friends, are you going to act or not? I'm getting impatient. Provoked, their anger flared up. They raised their clubs to strike. 20. I tensed my core and sprang up from the ground. Rubbed my wrists hard against the corner wall. The thin rope fell away. Grabbed a garbage bag from the bin and smashed it on the nearest thug's head. Beer bottles shattered, stunning him. While he hesitated, I seized his baseball bat. The next strike knocked him unconscious. From being tied up to fighting back took less than 3 minutes. Quick and efficient, 1 hit per person. After cleaning up, looking at the mess, I waved toward the shadows behind me. Dropped the bat and left. Running frantically, I finally reached the bike shed on the school's left side. Lucas had one thug by the collar, his other fist bloody from punching. His knuckles were already stained red. I practically slid on my knees to reach him, holding him tight. Lucas, it's okay, it's all okay now. Momentum made him struggle briefly, but upon recognizing me, he instantly relaxed. He collapsed against my shoulder, breathing heavily. They were bullying people. I patted his back gently. I know, it wasn't your fault. More figures emerged from the shadows, binding up the thugs one by one. They hesitated when they saw Sophie, who also appeared badly beaten. I led Lucas over by the hand, looking down at her. Her hair was disheveled, face bruised, one arm in a cast now stained with blood. She trembled in the corner, calling desperately for her system, but received no response. What a shame the true culprit had escaped. Though forcing separation from a host would likely cause significant damage. Otherwise, why would the system, despite clearly despising Sophie, never choose another host? If it had just bound itself to me, the mission would have been simple. It must be because Sophie was the only possible host. Forced separation would cause severe backlash. Now with such a major failure, romance was impossible. The system either had to accept the impossible task and stay with Sophie, or forcibly separate, abandoning her here. Now, the system's choice was obvious. 21. Blood trickled from Sophie's lips and she flinched involuntarily at the sight of Lucas. She'd clearly taken a real beating. I sighed helplessly. I told you to stay away from Lucas. I warned you, but you wouldn't listen. What else could I do? You. She pointed at me in disbelief. Why are you unhurt? I gave a light laugh. How could I be hurt? The wildest dog needs the strongest leash. I thought you'd be more patient, but you failed again so quickly. I shook my head in disappointment. But I couldn't really blame her. Even with more effort, this would have been the outcome. Because Lucas was a mad dog, stubborn as a mule. Once he decided on something, that was it. He never accepted substitutes. Even trying to make amends, he'd only try desperately to be good to me. Using an identical face to do this would only make him more disgusted, more repulsed. As we left, holding Lucas's hand, I heard her shout, "I won't give up, I won't give up." Whether she gave up didn't matter. Intentional injury or attempted murder. Either charge would mean years in prison. Moreover, she'd tried to harm the only son of the Reed family. She wouldn't get out until she'd served every last day. 22. Actually, after hearing Sophie's conversation with her system that day, I told Lucas everything when we got home. Lucas and I had no secrets. Even if we did, something this major would never be hidden. After hearing it, Lucas immediately picked up his phone to call people, determined to subdue her before she could act. He even declared righteously, "We should have beaten her senseless the first time she acted stupid. If we'd taught her a lesson then, none of this would have happened." I held him back, trying to reason with him. But as he listened, he suddenly pulled me into his arms. "Nothing will happen, right?" I patted his back and replied, "Of course not, her little tricks aren't enough." After calming Lucas, we carefully planned our approach. Direct confrontation and physical submission was one option, but it was too brutal and unjustifiable. The situation needed to be resolved cleanly and elegantly. We decided to remain reactive, not to act before she made her move. When she did act, we'd follow her plan. After understanding her true intentions, we'd strike decisively. However, from Lucas playing along with Sophie's act to him running out of school, we hadn't communicated at all. For both of us, it was improvised. Yet we trusted each other completely and stayed in sync. Isn't that a skill in itself? Not knowing what Sophie would do, we had bodyguards follow her. They were only to intervene if absolutely necessary. Still maintaining one goal: keep it clean. If we only acted in self-defense, it would be justified. If others got involved, the lines would blur. 23. Back home, Lucas still wouldn't let go of me. The servants were used to this by now. They didn't react to us entering the same room, just continued their work. I had barely put down my bag when he closed the door and pressed me against it. One arm around my waist, he buried his face in my neck. I was so scared. Scared you'd get hurt, scared you'd leave me. I promised you I wouldn't hit people, but today I did, and I hurt them badly. Will you think I'm bad? Will you hate me? Like a dejected puppy, utterly miserable. If those beaten thugs could see this scene, they'd be speechless. Getting beaten so badly, and he's the one feeling wronged. Oh, the irony. I smiled, gently stroking his neck. You're not bad. This was self-defense, it was right. When I said no fighting, I meant no unnecessary fighting. If someone attacks you, of course you should fight back. His arm suddenly tightened around my waist. He raised his head, coming very close. His eyes were hungry and wild, with an intensity that seemed ready to devour me whole. He whispered in my ear, "I'm born bad, but you still can't leave me. How domineering you can be bad, but I can't run away." His large hands tightly gripped mine, tightening, then releasing again. Fingers intertwined, breath shallow and uneven. He guided my hands to his neck, pressing slightly. My hands were small. Against his neck they barely covered half. You hold the leash. When you're here, I won't be bad. How interesting, planning to bind someone for life. He hugged me tightly. No, for many, many lifetimes. I want forever and ever. My eyes crinkled with a smile. I didn't answer. Just hugged him back.